Alright, so recently I went ahead and made a purchase that I probably shouldn't have on my limited budget, but I bought Spider-Man 2. I haven't talked a lot about Spider-Man 1 on this channel. In fact, I don't think I've ever really talked about it, so I'll just say that I liked it and move on. I'll also say that I really enjoyed the Miles Morales game, and I think it's even better than the first one. I was very excited to get my hands on Spider-Man 2 because it looked like more of the first game, and it had Venom in it, and I'm a huge Venom maniac, baby! At least in concept, so I wanted to give it a shot. I will be talking about spoilers here, so if you're not interested in getting spoiled in the game, go ahead and leave the video and come back. But Spider-Man 2 is a game, I guess. So as much as I like the first game, I will say I overplayed it. I decided to 100% it and it got very boring and I got tired of the game's content very quickly. It felt too samey. All of the combat ends up being boring and tiresome after a while, and the same could be said for Miles Morales, but Miles' electricity Venom powers help that a lot. Speaking of, why does he have powers called Venom when the symbiote Venom exists? It's pretty weird and stupid. Immediately after jumping into Spider-Man 2, you can feel the power of the PS5. It's quick, it's sleek, the load times are incredible. In fact, they don't even exist. The game transitions from cutscene to gameplay in ways that I didn't even know possible, and that's really great. Jumping back in felt so natural. The swinging is barely changed, and so is the combat. You keep a lot of the same abilities that Miles had in Miles Morales, which is nice, and Peter is given these spider legs to keep up, and they're okay, I guess. For the first 6 or so hours, I played a lot as Miles because he was just so much more fun to play as. It felt like everything that had to do with Miles in this game was better because of his little mini solo title. The opening hour and a half of this game was some of the most fun that I've had in a game all year though. Playing as Spider-Man and Miles fighting Sandman and just getting to re-explore New York was so much fun, but unfortunately it went downhill as soon as I got to Coney Island. As fun as the gameplay is and as fun as it can be to feel like Spider-Man here, this game is harmed massively by its missions. Coney Island in particular had me stuck fighting wave after wave after wave and some of the most annoying enemies in the game, the Hunters. It's just annoying because I feel like I should be ready to wrap up a mission and then I have to fight 6 more waves of enemies. Sure, getting into a rhythm can be fun, but a lot of these enemies aren't fun to fight at all. The standard thugs are okay, sure, and I don't mind the flame cultists, but my goodness, the Hunters suck, and don't even get me started on the symbiotes that pop up way later in the game. The game just kept beating me into the ground, and once we got to the final few hours, I genuinely got to a point that I had to switch to one of the lowest difficulties because the game decided that throwing a million symbiotes at me that took forever to die was a fun design choice. It's not. The boss fights aren't much better either. They're a huge step up from the first game, but they slowly get worse and worse. The first lizard fight is terrific though, and then we get the Mr. Negative fight, which felt straight out of a Souls game. These two fights are the peak of the gameplay for me. They're both fast paced, extremely fun and rewarding challenges, especially Miles versus Negative. I absolutely love this, and the chase that goes on after is so good. The story implications that we get from this part are also pretty great, but I'll talk about that later. Unfortunately, things go downhill pretty quick after that as far as it comes with bosses. Peter versus Craven has some very fun mechanics, and the second phase is pretty neat, but beyond that just sort of got on my nerves after a while because it went on a little too long. And Miles versus Peter is very cool because you can't just air combo him into oblivion, and fighting Peter is really cool story wise, but I felt like it was a lot easier than it should have been. Venom versus Craven is alright and mainly held up by the fact that you're playing as Venom, and I think Venom feels amazing to play with. I would play an entire Miles Morales sized game as Venom, but the mechanics still, they're nothing really incredible to me. And Peter versus Scream is alright, but again, I'm just bored. Like by this point, I've just felt bored by the game's bosses. Also, I have way more issues with Scream, but we'll get to her later. And the final boss with Venom is just agonizing. Essentially 4 phases and they just drone on and on and on. It's not fun to fight what amounts to the same boss 4 times. Why are there so many phases? I mean, this is the same thing for every boss in the game, really. It's like they take the same general mission structure and they never fucking end. I don't like the crime system either. I'm sorry, I don't. It's repetitive, just swinging around to stop the same hunters blind or the same symbiote nest or the same robbery. Fighting hordes of enemies just isn't fun to me. Like, I get to beat them up, but having so many tanky enemies and so many enemies at one time is just not, it's not fun at all. I also do not like the puzzles in this game whatsoever. They sucked in the first game and they suck in this game. I hate them. I hate this stupid genome one where you have to like click this thing or whatever. I hate playing as this thing to like shoot bees. I hate all these little science quizzes and experiments you have to do. And why are there spider bot sections? I fucking hate spider bot sections. Okay, so I will admit a lot of these issues were prevalent in the first game too, but the first game does a few things well enough and some of these issues are not nearly as bad there to where I vastly prefer it. And one thing that game does better than this game is the story. So how's the story in Spider-Man 2? Well, it fucking sucks. Okay. That's an exaggeration, but it's not good. I feel like I could speak a bit better on writing than gameplay since I know more of what I'm talking about here. It starts off decently enough. We pick up about a year after the events of Miles Morales from what I can tell, and Peter and Miles are working as a pretty solid team. The reintroduction of Harry is pretty well done, and Craven's here, so that's cool, except Craven has an army for some reason. And look, I know why he has one. It's because we need a swarm of enemies to beat up, but come on. I know not everything in the game's narrative is going to mesh with the gameplay, but when the story story is meant to be paid attention to, I'd expect a bit more work, and this isn't the only time it happens. I'll get to there eventually. Kraven is whatever, honestly. I felt like he never did anything in the story to warrant his existence. He hunts down some other villains and we end up with a side tangent lizard storyline, which was pretty fun, but at the end of the day, he's just there to buy time for Venom to show up. Kraven barely has any presence in the game too. You spend more time with his hunters than him, and that should be how it is if you're gonna have hunters, but when he does show up, he's nothing more than a bland idea of a character instead of a truly well-written, compelling antagonist. Both Martin Lee, who I have issues with mind you, and Otto outshine him at every turn. So there's one thing the story does do right though. Well, two things, but one thing when it comes to the main story, and for me, that's the black suit storyline. And don't get me wrong, it does nothing new here at all. It's all the same stuff you'd expect from this. It's like the same stuff we got in Spider-Man 3 and Spectacular Spider-Man and whatever else you can think of, but just because it's been done before doesn't mean it's not good. It's always fun to see Peter Parker lose it and become a snarky asshole, and I think this game paints it very well just because he's not a cool snarky asshole, he's a dumb one who thinks he's cool. Also, having the symbiote go on a rampage while Peter was sleeping was such a good idea, and I'm glad to see it decided to do what Spectacular did in that regard. Which, speaking of, Spectacular Spider-Man is the best Venom adaptation ever. Please go watch that show if you haven't, it's so good. I think the second main thing the game does right has to do with Miles. Miles and Peter's relationship deteriorates in such a way that makes sense. Seeing with both Harry's arrival and the black suit, it makes complete sense why everything happens, and it's really sad to see Miles get pushed away like he does, but even more triumphant when he puts himself first and continues to show that he's just as good at being Spider-Man than Peter, if not better. And then there's the stuff with him and Martin Lee, and it's so damn good. It's pretty generic, but I love the execution of it. Lee has a ton of issues in the first game, but he's still pretty good. He just mainly felt like a villain that should have a Jekyll and Hyde thing going on, but instead he just cares about people, but at the same time wants to commit mass murder. The game fully makes him sympathetic, and he just becomes downright cool. Seeing Miles come to terms with what happened and them really like working together was great. Him letting Lee escape was so cool, and then when the two of them rescue Peter, it's even better. Okay, but let's talk about Venom. He sucks, guys. From the second that Harry gets the symbiote back, the story just swan dives into an oblivion for me. We go from Harry being sympathetic enough to immediately tongue-swirling Venom. Venom then wants to enslave mankind, which quite frankly comes out of absolutely nowhere. And that's what's so annoying, because it's another instance where Venom has to do this so that you can battle the enemies, and they suck so bad. The reason Venom works for me most of the time is because he's a former friend of Peter, and he becomes one of the most personal villains. Peter's pissed off his friend, and he's pissed off the symbiote by ditching it. It's why making Harry his childhood best friend, Venom, on paper is such a terrific idea, but in practice it just doesn't go anywhere, and he doesn't do anything to attack Peter at all. Instead, all we get is this apocalypse storyline because we have to have it for gameplay. Sure, he infects MJ with the Scream symbiote, but that's over before it has any time to actually begin, and it comes out of left field. I felt confused while this happened, and again, by the time it's over, it felt like it was barely part of the game. It's just used for an okay boss fight that I've already forgotten about mostly, and sure, there's some character stuff in it, but it's really just the characters repeating the same things over and over again, so I don't feel like they couldn't have just done this in a cutscene. When Harry is inevitably saved, I feel nothing because I never got enough of a chance to get used to Harry before the symbiote. It's just Venom taking over, and I get that's what they're trying to do, but I feel like in other adaptations you still get to see the host and see what the host is going through when they're with Venom. I think this is part of the issues of going through the Harry is dying plotline in the first place, because you could have had Harry in the first game. Oh, and now we have to talk about anti-venom. Man, this shit is stupid. In an interview, Yuri Lowenthal compares the symbiote to an addiction, and you can actually feel that when playing the game. You get an immediate boost in power, and the gameplay is fun for a bit before you lose it and are brought back down to reality in a form of withdrawal. It's a great narrative idea, and it pairs with the gameplay very nice too. Too bad Peter suddenly gets anti-venom, which is just the symbiote stuff without any of the bad elements. I get it, it's to make the game more fun and bring back the powers, but man, does it just shoot the narrative in the foot. You know, the black suit is always supposed to be this thing that Peter gets, and it makes him more powerful, and yes, I guess it does kind of make him a stronger and better Spider-Man, but he loses himself in the process. So just having him have the abilities without any of the negative things just completely like kicks the Venom storyline and the moral of it in the foot, and I just don't think it really works. It just shoots everything down for me, and it's another instance of the game just doing something because they have to do it for gameplay rather than making the story work. And again, I know this is always going to happen in video games, but come on, like, could you not do anything better? You want us to pay attention to the story, and then you do stuff like this. Listen, man, video game stories just being video game stories is not an excuse anymore. I really wanted to like Spider-Man 2. I liked the first game again, and I loved Miles Morales, but I only finished this game out of obligation. I really wish I enjoyed it. I had fun playing it at times, and playing as the symbiote was really cool, so I get why they bring back the white suit. But man, do I never want to touch it again. I immediately uninstalled it, so I didn't even have the drive to go play any of the side missions like the completionist in me from the first game and Miles Morales wanted to do. What'd you guys think? Did you love the game, or did you feel similarly to me? I don't hate it, and I don't think it necessarily sucks, but it's a massive disappointment, and one that I hope doesn't translate into Wolverine or the inevitable Spider-Man 3. I just think they can do a lot better, and they need to find some way to build upon the first game that doesn't involve just going bigger because going bigger ultimately made a worse experience. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Why the hell am I a cube? What the fuck?